Tonight we will be discussing the famous children's book, The Jungle Book, specifically a chapter or short story within the book called Rikki Tikki Tavi. Today Kipling is going to discuss how his early life, the Victorian era, and the society in which the book was published shaped his literary works.
Hello, Rudyard Kipling here. I'm about to be interviewed by the world-renowned interviewer Lucy Donahue.
Good morning, Mr. Kipling.
Good morning, Lucy. How are you?
I'm swell. How are you?
Oh, never better. In the very beautiful house I own, in the very beautiful jungle room. Reminds me of my childhood.
Alright, I'd like to start this interview by maybe getting a few details about your early childhood.
Right, my early childhood. Well, I was born on December 30th, 1865 in Bombay, India. But I only lived there till I was a mere 5 years old, till I was sent back to Great Britain to live with a foster family, which was not very fun at all. Well, my early life trepidations heavily influenced my early works.
You are a very imaginative and creative man. Do you think that maybe your parents had an influence on you?
Well, thank you for the compliments. My father was a famous sculpting architect, and my mother was very into the arts and a very beautiful woman, I heard.
You told us a little bit about your early life. Would you like to elaborate on your teenage years, perhaps?
Well, in my teenage years, I wrote for a local newspaper in the town, and that's where I got my start with writing, and therefore began my love of literature. In my spare time when I was working with the newspaper, I wrote books that sprung me into instant fame.
How do you think that growing up during the Victorian era influenced your literature?
Well, I mostly wrote about fantasy and children's books to sort of stray away from the typical, normal Victorian era writing styles. My writings usually strayed from the norm, but I was often criticized for my old-fashioned way of writing.
What do you like so much about writing children's books?
It allows me to be creative and use adult ideas back into the childhood way of thinking. Using my imagination. It brings me back to when I was a boy!
Mr. Kipling, would you please elaborate on the short story excerpt from The Jungle Book, Rikki Tikki Tavi?
Well, it was based on almost true events, because in India they had the families in the bungalows would have mongooses live with them, because they were the only predator of the king cobras that would often come into the house and kill little children and attack the families. So, in the story I wrote that Rikki Tikki Tavi was the mongoose in question. So, but in the story, Rikki Tikki Tavi, he had to fight off two king cobras, very antagonistic, and he was afraid, but he still did it. Although the family thought that Rikki Tikki was protecting them and wanted to, they really had blood out for each other, Rikki Tikki and the cobras. They had bad blood, and Rikki Tikki wanted revenge on the cobras, so one of the cobras went into the bathroom one night to attack the family and jump out and kill them. But Rikki Tikki had none of this because he wanted his revenge on them. When the cobra was going into the bathroom, Rikki Tikki attacked him. They made such a commotion it woke the father, and the father came in with his gun, but before he could use the gun, Rikki Tikki killed the cobra.
Mr. Kipling, do you perhaps think that you use the mongoose and the cobras as symbols of society of the time?
Well, we use them as sort of an extended metaphor to show the difference between good and evil.
How do you think the Victorian era influenced your writings?
Well, the Victorian era, Britain was thought to be superior to all others in the world. And it's manifested in my writing, as you can clearly tell. I'm going to read an excerpt from my story, but I have to take my glasses off to do this because these are my fog glasses. As he closed his jaws tighter and tighter, for he made sure he would be bandaged to death and the horror of his family. He preferred to be found with his teeth locked. He was dizzy, aching, and felt shaken to pieces when something went off like a thunderclap just behind him. He got wind and knocked him senseless, and the red fire sighed his fur. The big man had been wakened by the noise and had fired both barrels of the shotgun into Nag just behind the hood of his snake neck, of course. The people I'm going to explain to the family. Teddy is the son. The mother, also known as Alice, is her name, is the mother. The big man is the father in question. Then Teddy's mother came in with a very white face and saw what was left of Nag, and Ricky Ticky dragged himself into Teddy's bedroom and spent half the night shaking himself tenderly to find out whether he was really broken into 40 pieces as he fancied.
That was a very interesting excerpt, Mr. Kipling.
Quite interesting indeed. As you can tell, it really shows the difference between good and evil, but from terms a child can understand, as the mongoose being good and the cobra being evil.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Kipling. Do you have any last thoughts?
I will never have a last thought. But here I will play you something.
Sing to your fledglings again. Mother, oh, lift up your head. Evil that plagued us is slain. Death in the garden lies dead. Terror that hid in the roses is gone. He lies on the rubbish heap dead.
That was a little song that has something to do with Ricky Tikki Tavi. Thank you! Anytime you want to interview me, go right ahead.